Naomi Graves had not seen a full sunrise in 14 months. Not really. She'd been awake for most of them, standing at a bus stop before 5 in the morning, thermos in one hand, work schedule memorized in the other. But she hadn't actually watched one, hadn't stood still long enough to let the light touch her face and mean something. Sunrises, like rest, like laughter, like the version of herself she used to know, had become things that happened to other people. She worked 5 jobs. That fact, she stated plainly, made strangers wince. Friends, the few she had time to keep, would press their hands to their chests like they were absorbing a small wound. But to Naomi, it wasn't dramatic. It was arithmetic. Money went out. Money had to come in. Marcus's debts didn't care about her exhaustion, so she didn't either. It had started 2 years ago, quietly the way disasters usually do. Marcus Graves, her husband of 6 years, a man who could walk into any room and make it feel like he'd been expected, had made what he called a calculated risk, a business investment, a friend of a friend with an opportunity that couldn't wait. Naomi had been at her nursing assistant job when he texted her. "Don't worry, this is how wealth is built, babe. Trust me." She had trusted him. The investment collapsed inside of 3 months. Then came the second loan, taken to cover the first, then a third. Each time, Marcus appeared in the kitchen with that particular expression she learned to dread, part shame, part performance, and explained it with the patience of a man teaching a child about weather. "These things happen in business, Naomi. I need a little more time. Just help me get stable, and then we reset. We reset together." She believed him the second time, and the third. By the time she stopped counting, Naomi was cleaning office buildings from 6 to 9 in the morning, working a hospital laundry shift from 10 to 3, tutoring high school students online in the evenings, stocking a pharmacy warehouse 2 nights a week, and picking up weekend shifts at a diner near the highway, where the tips were reliable and the regulars didn't ask too many questions. She sent nearly everything into the joint account Marcus managed. "For the debt," he said. "For our future," he said. She nodded and refilled her thermos and caught the next bus. Marcus, during the same period, he had grown easier in his skin. His wardrobe improved in small, expensive increments. A new watch. He said it was a gift from a client. Dinners she was never invited to attend. Phone calls taken in the car. Windows rolled up. He called it networking. He called it grinding on his end. He called Naomi practical, then dependable, then, when the compliments stopped altogether, nothing at all. She noticed. She was too tired to investigate, but she noticed. When the first crack in the surface appeared on a Thursday, Naomi had gone to deposit a check during a rare 30-minute gap between jobs and found the teller hesitating over her keyboard in that particular way that meant bad news was coming, wrapped in professionalism. "There's a restriction on this account," the woman said softly. "A restriction? Some large withdrawals triggered a review. Your husband was notified." Naomi stood at the counter for a moment after that, listening to the ambient noise of the bank, the printer, someone's phone, the distant sound of normal life continuing, and tried to feel something other than unsurprised. She didn't mention it to Marcus. He was in a good mood that evening, stretched out on the couch with a glass of something she didn't recognize. "You look tired," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Get some rest." She went to bed. She didn't sleep. The receipts started appearing after that, or maybe they'd always been there, and she'd only now trained herself to see them. A restaurant she'd never been to, a charge for a boutique she couldn't name. Marcus intercepting the mail with a casual fluency that told her this was practiced, not accidental. When she asked, he pivoted fast. "You're overthinking. You're paranoid. I thought you trusted me." And trust became the thing he held in front of her like a mirror angled to show her the worst version of herself. One afternoon, after a 14-hour stretch that had left her hands shaking and her lower back singing in 3-part harmony, Naomi came home early. The pharmacy warehouse had cut her shift short due to a computer system error, and for one unguarded moment, she'd allowed herself to imagine 30 quiet minutes before Marcus came home. She heard voices before she got the key fully in the lock. Music, laughter, the bright sound of crystal. Marcus was entertaining. She stood in the hallway outside their apartment door, with her work bag still on her shoulder, and listened to her husband hold court. His voice had a quality in those spaces, gatherings she was never part of, that it lost around her. Easy, expansive, like a man unburdened. I'm telling you, Marcus was saying, laughter threading through each word. Art, I don't know why more people don't figure this out. You just need the right infrastructure. Someone asked what he meant. Somebody dependable, Marcus said. Somebody who doesn't ask a lot of questions. Somebody who works. He paused and she could hear the smile in his voice before he said it. Naomi's running 5 jobs right now. 5. She thinks it's all going to debt. Bless her heart. Laughter. Easy, warm, unashamed. That's cold, Marcus. That's strategy. And she signed for half of it anyway. She just doesn't know which half. As long as she's grinding, everything holds. She ain't going anywhere. She's too tired to leave. Another voice amused. Bro, that's not a wife. That's a plantation. Marcus didn't correct them. He laughed. She's efficient. I'll give her that. Naomi heard the word. She let it sit where it landed, flat and final as a door closing. She did not go inside. She turned and walked back down the hallway, down the stairs, and out into the evening air. Her legs moved without consulting her. The street was loud and indifferent. A bus passed, a child on a bicycle, the ordinary machinery of a Thursday. She sat on a bench 2 blocks away and remained very still. She was not crying. She would examine that later, the dry-eyed clarity of it, how the absence of tears felt less like coldness and more like the body recognizing that some moments were too structural for water. This was not a wound. This was a diagnosis. Where Marcus had not said those words in anger. He had said them with pride. That was what stayed with her through the bus ride home, through the careful performance of being asleep when he slid into bed smelling of good whiskey and someone else's laughter. He had bragged. She had been his proof of concept. Naomi lay in the dark beside her husband and did something she hadn't done in 2 years. She stopped performing exhaustion and started thinking. She thought about the bank officer's hesitation. Am I the intercepted mail? The lifestyle charges against an account she'd been told held nothing but debt payments. The watch, the dinners, the way Marcus said the word trust like it was something she owed him automatically, the way rent is owed to a landlord. And then she thought about that phrase. She signed for half of it anyway. She just doesn't know which half. That sentence was a door. By the time Marcus's breathing deepened into sleep, Naomi had decided. She wasn't going to confront him. Nah, not yet. Not with nothing but hurt and suspicion, which was all he'd need to redirect the entire conversation back toward her instability, her paranoia, her failure to appreciate everything he was working toward. She was going to learn. The next morning, she moved through her routine like nothing had shifted inside her. Coffee, uniform, early bus. She smiled at the office workers whose fingerprints she wiped from glass every morning and thought about signatures. She thought about which papers she'd signed across 6 years of marriage, eyes half open, trusting the summary Marcus provided, because she'd been too tired to read, and he'd always frowned when she slowed things down. On her lunch break, she walked to the public records office and asked about filings connected to their address. The clerk was bored, efficient, helpful. Naomi gave her name, and then, on instinct, gave Marcus's. What she found was not nothing. It was not yet enough. But it was the first thread of something that, when pulled, would unravel everything Marcus Graves had built on the foundation of her silence. She went back to her shift. She stocked shelves. She smiled at the pharmacist who always asked how she was doing. Fine, she said, just fine. She was, for the first time in 14 months, telling the truth. Naomi did not rush. That was the part people would not understand later. The patience of it. The deliberate, an unhurried quality of what she built over the following weeks. She had been moving fast for 2 years, had worn fast into her body like a second skeleton. Now she slowed down on purpose, and the slowness felt like reclaiming something that had been taken. She opened a new bank account on a Tuesday afternoon between her laundry shift and tutoring. A small branch, quiet, the kind of place where the teller offered her a hard candy and didn't look hurried. Naomi deposited $40. It just to open it, and felt something almost ceremonial about the transaction. Then she began routing money. Not much. Tips from the diner, a tutoring bonus, occasional overtime pay. Amounts too small for Marcus to track, too consistent to be accidental. She kept a spreadsheet on her phone under a folder titled Recipe Ideas that Marcus would never open. At the same time, she started going back through papers, back through memory. She visited Mrs. Eunice Caldwell, the landlord of the apartment they'd rented when they first married, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 60s who'd always had a particular look for Marcus. Not unkind, but watchful. Naomi brought sweet potato pie because some conversations required an offering. Eunice let her in without asking why. They sat at a kitchen table with good light, and after enough small talk to be respectful, Naomi asked about the rental paperwork. Whose name had been on the original lease? Eunice set her fork down. "Hi, both of you," she said carefully. "At first." And then? The older woman looked at her with the particular steadiness of someone who had been waiting years for this question. "Marcus came by one afternoon, said there was a credit issue, asked me to reissue the documents with adjustments, said you'd agreed to it, said it was cleaner that way. Did you see my signature? On the new one?" Eunice shook her head slowly. "I thought it was strange at the time, but he was so—" She paused, her choosing the word like she was reaching for something precise. "Smooth about it. You know how he can be." "Yes," Naomi said. "I know exactly how he can be." Eunice retrieved a folder from a cabinet in the hallway. She was that kind of organized, the kind that saved things because someday someone might need them, and produced a copy of the amended lease. She slid it across the table without theatrics. Naomi's name was on it, not removed, repositioned. Her signature appeared in a place Marcus had told her didn't exist, as a guarantor, as a secondary obliger, as the person the liability fell to if everything else dissolved. She had signed it. She just hadn't known what she was signing. "You can take that," Eunice said firmly. "Take whatever you need. Thank you for keeping it. Thank you for finally looking." Eunice walked her to the door and held her hand for a moment before releasing it. "He always came in talking about what he was building, never once mentioned who was building it for him." Naomi carried the document home in her bag. That night, while Marcus was on a phone call with the bedroom door closed, a call he took standing up, voice low, which meant it was either money or the woman she had started to suspect but not yet confirmed. She sat at the kitchen table and scanned the lease into her laptop. She added it to the folder. The folder was called, plainly, A Documentation. She wasn't being clever. She was being accurate. In the following days, she returned to the bank and asked to speak with a loan officer named David Reese, who had an air of careful neutrality that she appreciated. She spread her copies across his desk and asked him to walk her through the structure of the obligations in plain English. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "These agreements were designed to distribute liability. As long as consistent payments came in, the structure stayed invisible. If payments stopped, the truth surfaces," Naomi finished. David looked at her. "You should speak with an attorney." "I already made the appointment." Attorney Claudette Washington had an office above a dry cleaner and a reputation in 3 counties for being the attorney women called when the situation had moved past unfortunate into structural. She wore reading glasses on a chain and did not take notes because she didn't need to. Question is timing. How much time do I question his timing? How much time do I need? Enough to let him keep signing things. Claudette smiled faintly. Men like your husband don't stop moving. They mistake momentum for control. We'll use that. The woman arrived in Naomi's peripheral vision on a Wednesday. She'd known about her in the abstract, receipts, charges, the pattern of withdrawals that aligned too neatly with restaurant tags and hotel check-ins. But now she had a face. Aaliyah Morse, young, luminous, with the kind of easy confidence that came from being selected rather than earned. Naomi spotted her on the sidewalk outside a boutique she cleaned twice a week, laughing at something Marcus whispered in her ear. For one full breath, memorize the for one full breath, memorize the tableau, and then went back inside to finish mopping the floor. Naomi told Claudette. Claudette said, "Good, keep moving." The confrontation Marcus manufactured came on a Sunday evening. He had the practiced cadence of someone who had rehearsed the conversation, the pivot toward freedom, the performative sighing about connection. Watch the pivot toward Aaliyah without quite naming her. He wanted out, but wanted Naomi to absorb the cost of his wanting. "There's an opportunity," he said near the end, which was how every new phase of their marriage had begun. He slid a document across the dinner table. This restructures everything. One signature, and we're past this. Naomi looked at the document. She read it, which she had not always done. She read it a second time. I'll have my attorney review it, she said. The silence that followed was instructive. Your attorney, Marcus repeated. I have one now, Naomi said pleasantly. Would you like her card? He pushed for the signature anyway. He framed it as urgency, as trust, as the last favor she owed him. She agreed to sign, but at a notary, publicly, with proper documentation of all parties present. Marcus accepted this without understanding why she'd asked for it. Because men who mistake compliance for stupidity often can't read the difference between surrender and strategy. Elia came to the notary office. Naomi had expected this. She sat in the lobby with crossed legs and the breezy possession of someone who believed she was watching the formalities of someone else's dissolution. She smiled at Naomi with precisely calibrated warmth. I didn't expect you, Elia said. I didn't expect me either, Naomi replied evenly. For a long time. In the signing room, Marcus executed his portions with his usual large, pressing signature, the kind that left impressions on the pages beneath, the kind that wanted to be remembered. Then the pen came to Naomi. She held it for a moment. We're good? Marcus asked. We're clear, Naomi said, and signed. What Marcus did not know, what he had not read carefully enough to know, because men who count on exhaustion don't prepare for attention, was that Claudette had advised her on exactly what that signature accomplished and what it did not. The document, as presented, cleared a specific set of obligations that had been wrongly attributed to Naomi. It did not protect Marcus from the reassessment that was already in motion at the bank. It did not undo the documentation Naomi had spent 6 weeks assembling. It did not restore the ambiguity he needed to continue operating. It only looked like a closing. It was actually a confirmation. 3 days later, Marcus's phone began ringing in a way it hadn't before. Naomi watched him pace the kitchen, jaw tight, color draining. He checked balances. He called people who didn't answer. By the afternoon of the second day, he turned to her with the specific wild-eyed quality of a man, discovering that the floor he'd been standing on was a door. What did you do? He said. I signed what you asked me to sign, Naomi replied. This isn't what was supposed to happen. I know. She poured herself a glass of water. What was supposed to happen was that I'd keep working and you'd keep spending, and eventually the structure would collapse onto me because my name was the one holding the weight. I read the documents, Marcus, all of them, the ones you showed me and the ones you didn't. He stared at her. You've been, how long? Long enough. Aaliyah arrived that night, unannounced and upset in a way that had lost its polish, mascara imprecise, voice fraying at the edges. She looked at Marcus and said, You told me this was handled. She looked at Naomi and said, You did this. You benefited from it, Naomi said without heat. Something moved across Aaliyah's face. Not guilt exactly, but the shape of it. She picked up her bag and left, and the sound of the door was definitive. Marcus sat down. For the first time in 6 years, he looked like the room was too large for him. You were supposed to be quiet, he said. Naomi stood. I was quiet, she said, until it was time not to be. In the weeks that followed, the consequences arrived in the form of paperwork, which was fitting, since paperwork was how it had all been constructed. Bank notices, liability reassignments, the specific and unhurried language of institutions that do not take sides but do follow evidence. Claudette filed what needed filing, and Naomi documented every interaction and let the process move at its own pace. She reduced her transfers first, then stopped them entirely once Claudette confirmed the timing was right. She moved into a 1-bedroom apartment that had good light and a window she could leave open. She bought a plant. She made coffee slowly in the mornings and let it get almost too hot before she drank it, which was how she'd always liked it. Marcus tried apologies, then accusations, then a mediation request that Claudette declined on her behalf. He tried one final voicemail, his voice carrying the bruised quality of a man who had not been held accountable before and found the experience disorienting. I didn't think you had it in you, the voicemail said. Naomi listened to it once, then deleted it. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt something more durable than that. She ran into David Reese from the bank one afternoon at a coffee shop near her new apartment. He recognized her and said simply, "You look lighter." "I am," she said. She didn't tell her story often. When she did, she told it the way she'd lived through the end of it, without dramatics, with precision. She'd learned what she'd been signing. She'd stopped signing things she didn't understand. She'd let the truth be documented rather than performing it. One Saturday, she started volunteering at a financial literacy workshop in her neighborhood. Not as a speaker, as a facilitator. She helped people read forms. She asked them questions about documents they'd been told not to worry about. She watched the recognition move across their faces and recognized the exact moment in herself. Standing in Mrs. Caldwell's kitchen, with a lease in her hands and her whole marriage suddenly legible. A woman approached her at the end of one session, hesitant. "How did you learn all this?" Naomi considered. "By surviving something I didn't deserve," she said. And deciding that staying uninformed was the one thing I couldn't afford. She walked home that evening under a sky going amber at the edges. She thought about the woman she'd been outside that apartment door 14 months ago, her work bag still on her shoulder, her husband's laughter spilling under the doorframe, the word he'd used hanging in the air like smoke. She didn't feel anger toward that woman. She felt something closer to reverence. That woman had stayed standing when the floor dropped out. That woman had gone home and lain in the dark, and instead of drowning in what she'd heard, had started asking questions. Quiet questions. Patient questions. The kind that, in the right hands, moved mountains. Naomi unlocked her door and stepped inside. The apartment was hers. All of it. The silence and the light and the particular piece of a space that owed nothing to anyone else's story. She set her bag down. She was not behind. She was not catching up. She was not running 5 jobs or carrying invisible debt or performing gratitude for a man who had confused her endurance for ignorance. She was for the first time simply home,